I'm Andy Orr, and I'm with Disability Connections.
I'm Michael Lepak, local resident.
I'm Jordan Debon, and I'm a parent of a special needs kid, and we have a foundation called Accessibility First Foundation.
There you go, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Leandra.
Okay, thank you guys. These guys have been really, really helpful in not only the development of this assessment and reviewing it and making sure we were on track and that we were going in the right direction, but also, helping us look at a number of issues. I know Leandra and I sat with the police department one day and we talked about parking within the city of San Angelo and accessible parking. Sharon has always brought all kinds of very helpful thoughts and ideas and statements from people who aren't comfortable maybe coming and talking to me. They will talk to Sharon. Gigi, she has been very, very helpful in getting stuff done at ASU. We're going to talk about a committee of students we have at ASU that are working with us, so she's been very helpful. And all the others. Jordan's new to our committee, but we are very excited about having her and her belief as her position as a mom and getting that perspective into our discussions because, I have children, they're leaving me, they're grown and they're gone. So, except for Jennifer. Jennifer is still here. Theoretically, she's rarely at home, but she is still here. And then Michael back there, he's really working hard to do some things for the community as far as getting some activities going at the River Stage and has really good input and insight on some of the stuff that we do. So, with that being said, me and my sidekick here, this is Angela, we are going to go through the presentation we have, and then we're going to open it up for questions and comments from you guys. So I'm going to try to do this quickly, but not so quick that it doesn't make sense. And so again, if I need to slow down or go back, somebody just let me know that. All right, here you go. All right, so some of the things we're going to discuss today are, first of all, the self-assessment process. What was it? What does that mean? What did we do? How did we do it uniquely here? We're going to go over the findings. I want everybody to keep in mind these findings are a snapshot in time. And I think it was a very honest look and a very reflective look, and I think a very necessary look for the employees and the managers and the directors and assistant directors and administration to look at how we're doing, where are our training deficits, what do we need to do. Then we're going to talk about, which is more exciting to me, our progress to date. I think a lot of things have happened since we began this process, and I want everybody to be aware of that progress. And then we're going to talk a little bit about next. What's next? There's some exciting things coming down the road that I also want you to be aware of. So the ADA self-assessment process, the purpose of this, it is a requirement under the ADA that Title II cities, which is what we are, we're a public entity, evaluate their programs and services. You can do that combined with evaluating facilities. We chose not to do that. That's going to be coming later. This look is completely at the programs and services offered by the City of San Angelo. So some of y'all are going to have comments about facilities. We certainly want those. I think we do have some comment forms at the back of the room if you want to write a comment. If you don't feel comfortable speaking in a public group, we understand that. But there is going to be a second part to this coming later. This is talking about programs and services. The thing that I noticed as soon as I sent out surveys to our employees, they started recognizing within themselves that maybe they needed to learn some different things. And almost immediately, I started getting questions. I started getting questions on, I don't know what this means. Where can I learn more about this? I think I'm doing this wrong, which to me was like exciting on one hand, and then the other hand is like, oh my gosh, they're getting ahead of me. I want to do the assessment first. I'm very linear, and I want to finish this, and then we'll go to that. So a lot has happened during this time from when we started asking the questions of ourselves until this point, and we're going to get into that. It is a snapshot in time, as I said earlier. The period that we had where we were doing the assessment was April 10th through 17th. And how that process worked is I initially, even before we mentioned the term self-assessment to anybody within the city, except maybe Daniel, I sent out a form to all of the directors and asked them to list all the programs and services that they offer the public, as well as who is responsible for that program and service. And when you get your self-assessment report, you'll look at Appendix A, and there's like 3 pages of programs and services that are, this is my copy right here. I don't think we have any printed for people. You can find these on cosatx.us/ADA. There is a digital copy there. tx.us/ADA. So they came up with these 3 pages of programs and services that were offered by the city, as well as the names of the people who were running those programs. So the second step we took is I sent out assessment documents to everybody who ran a program or service for the city of San Angelo. It didn't matter if you were a director, if you were a manager, it didn't matter who you were. If you were listed as somebody who's responsible for a program and service in San Angelo, you received a copy of these assessments. We do want to check in the future how we're doing. So sometime in the spring, we're going to have a follow-up assessment that's going to basically be the same assessment sent out to the same kind of programs and services directors. Personnel have changed, but whoever operates those programs and services, that's who's going to get this new assessment, and we're going to see what progress we've made and where we still need to continue to improve. So the self-assessment findings, these are all the areas that we evaluated. The first one is basic administrative requirements. The ADA has some specific requirements for employers and for cities. Some of those include having an ADA coordinator. That's a title we have. There's nothing in the act that says it has to be called an ADA coordinator, but it has to be somebody responsible for ensuring these requirements are being met. There's posting requirements. There's some policies that they recommend. So that's what I'm talking about when we talk about basic administrative requirements. The other surveys, one was called General Non-Discrimination. It's very broad-based. And when you get a copy of your self-assessment, if you look at the back, there is a list of all the questions that were asked to our employees and very specific, detailed responses. So this is the communication survey, for instance. It has what the question was, all the choices, what percentage of our employees answered that choice. So it's as much information as we thought was helpful, but you can see the detail as to what our employees were asked. We also talked about communication. This is how we meet the needs of somebody who might have some sort of issues with communication, whether it's because they're visually impaired or they're hearing impaired or they just don't process information well. We looked at our department web pages, emergency management, event ticketing, curb ramp policies, and website accessibility. Outside of these areas, which we're going to talk about today, I also had, and the committee had, very in-depth conversations with our police department about the kinds of training that they receive regarding these kinds of issues as well. So when we look at the results of the basic administrative requirements, the first is you have an ADA coordinator. I was appointed the ADA coordinator on April 4th, 2023 at a council meeting that was open to the public. I actually wasn't present. I was at training that day, so I missed it. But they called me and told me I was appointed. After that, I wanted to be a certified ADA coordinator, so I started the certification process. I took and passed the exam in July of 2023, so I do have an actual certificate as an ADA coordinator. Whenever I was appointed, we wanted people to know as much as we could, and communication is always an issue for the city generally, and particularly in this area as well. So we posted it at all the public entrances in all of our buildings where the public has access. We put it on our city website. There's that cosatx.us/ADA website. That's where you can find pretty much anything we talk about today. We put it on all our social media, and we provided it to all news sources and various advocacy agencies. If you have a mailing list of people that are interested in these ideas and these things and want to be helpful and you can distribute information for us, send me that email link or that person's name, and I will contact them whenever we have something to distribute, such as information about this meeting, because sometimes the best way to get information out is not through our own resources, but through y'all. So we're always looking for more places to get information out. The self-assessment is a self-assessment. Yes, so we are only looking inward. This is part of the input that we're looking for from you guys to give us input if there's something that we missed. And we'll talk a little bit about, well, right now, actually, there are some ways where you can contact the city. The first is we do have a grievance policy. If you feel like you've been interacting with the city in such a way and we've been discriminated against, there is a formal grievance policy and process that we have adopted. You can find that on cosatx.us/ADA on that website. You can have the forms. You can also call me. We can give you a written document. We'll write it down for you. However we need to get the information from you regarding what your concern is, we are happy to do that. The policy that we currently have was adopted in 1993. When you look at the ADA, it does not have specific language you have to have in a grievance policy. It doesn't have a specific process that's spelled out. And so there are some basic requirements that are listed. I made sure that our policy that we have in place currently does meet the basic requirements of the Act. But what we have learned through this process is sometimes meeting the basic requirement is not enough. We also want to be helpful. So one of the future tasks for the ADA committee that we have is to take a look at our grievance policy and see if there's things that we need to do differently. Do the timelines need to be changed? Who it goes to, does that need to be changed? Or do we need to provide different avenues for filing grievances? So the recommendation on this item is to have the ADA Advisory Committee review that process. I will say during conversations with the committee, in one of our meetings, it was brought up that there's a lot of people who don't want to be angry with the city, and grievance is an angry word, and I agree it is. It's a legal word. It is the word we have to have because we are required to have a grievance process, so we hesitate to change that process to something other than that. So we have, in addition to the grievance policy, created a comment form on our website that if you just have a basic comment about something or you've noticed something, you can go and enter just a comment to us, and we'll still get it, we'll still review it, we'll still try to act on it, but it's not going to send you all the way through the formal grievance process to the city manager and all of those sorts of things. Absolutely, yes. Her question was, if you're like talking to somebody and you have an issue, she referenced parking. Yeah, if you have an issue like that, then you can always go on that ADA website. You can always call me as well, but the ADA website does have that online form, that webpage does, that you can fill that out, and it will come to me. The next administrative requirement is public notice under the ADA. What this means is that there are specific requirements to post as a Title II city. We have to make people aware that this is what we're doing related to these things, and those things are employment, reasonable modifications, filing complaints or grievance, effective communication, and then we have to have a statement that we're not going to charge a surcharge for giving you some sort of accommodation. So that there is actually a Department of Justice form that they recommend that you post. We entered our information into that DOJ approved form, and that's what's posted. We also provide that at all of the entrances to our buildings. We've run it on social media. It's on our webpage, and we are planning on having Lorelei do an audio recording of those things so that on Channel 17 periodically people can be reminded that this is how we accommodate people. And one thought that as y'all are thinking about the things we can do, this is what the QR codes, I don't know how helpful that would be, but if you've ever seen the notices, and I think it's going to be generational to some extent. I know I love QR codes. I know my mother does not, and my kids do. But if you ever see the text of a notice, it's really long, and it's pretty small. And we have some that are like in enlarged print, but they're very cumbersome. So think about and send me feedback either on our form or in person, or talk to me or call me about whether or not putting a QR code at the bottom of those notices so people can scan and get an electronic version of that would be helpful. I know that a lot of people in the have said that they really like reading electronic documents, and they certainly like documents to be read to them in a lot of ways. Yeah, it wouldn't be the only way. If I could ask you to hold some of your questions, or we're never going to get out of here by 6. I got a whole bunch. Thank you. So some of the areas of concern in the general non-discrimination. Oh, let's talk about the general non-discrimination. I jumped a slide. This is an important one. So those were all the basic administrative requirements. Now these are this general non-discrimination. This is a survey that was given to our employees. It was given to 61 employees. I sent it on a Sunday night, so when they came in Monday morning, it was the very first thing in their emails. So there was no way it got buried. They saw it. They had a period of time to answer it. If by the end of that time I hadn't heard from them, I started emailing them saying, hey, did you get this document? I need you to turn it in by this date. So this assessment, the general non-discrimination, was given to 61 employees that are responsible for programs and services at the city. The purpose is to identify their understandings of the city's responsibilities. It was very general stuff, lots of different kinds of questions on this survey. And the general finding was that most of our employees do understand very basic requirements under the ADA. They understood there was an ADA. They understood that we had a responsibility to serve people who have disabilities. And when I say most, I mean 85% or more answered those questions correctly. But we did also identify some areas of concern. So when you see these areas of concern or anywhere within the survey or this information on the slides up there, you see a little asterisk. That means that's an area that we have already trained on or addressing or have addressed. So some of the areas of concern in the general non-discrimination, that only 58% of our surveys knew who to contact for guidance about requests for modifications. I think that had a lot to do with at the time that even though we had somebody designated as the ADA coordinator, that information was on our website and it was in our HR policy, but it wasn't talked about very much. It didn't come up in conversation. It wasn't being pushed very much by the city. So I think if you ask people that now, they would know that they're supposed to call me. But 58% of the employees knew who to contact. And at that time, I had already been part of the conversation, so I think a lot of them said it was me. The other people said it was HR. Only 77% knew that miniature horses could be considered in some circumstances as service animals. And 19% answered that any animal could be considered a service animal. There is a little bit of, misunderstanding about service animals versus comfort animals and when those apply and when they don't apply. So there's been some training that we've done. Kim and I are actually working on some training for the community that's going to hopefully help clarify some of those issues and provide a better perspective on service animals. Only 79% of our employees understood that a service animal could be removed from the location within certain circumstances. That is something that we're training on, when you can remove a service animal with a very clear understanding that if the animal leaves, the person still needs served. So that is a training element that we're working on. 57% of our people did not understand how to ask for credible assurance when a person is using a power-driven mobility device. So this is if you're in a little cart, some sort of electric vehicle that's helping you get around. There's a way that you can ascertain whether or not that is legitimately required or somebody just prefers to use it. My recommendation is, unless it's problematic and the situation's dangerous, that if people think they need that, then they need that. So I don't anticipate this to come up a lot, but we are going to try to train our employees on when it's appropriate and how to ask those questions. Only 48% of our employees answered yes when they asked if all the accessibility features, the buttons, the ramps, all the lifts and things worked in their facilities. And only 46% of those indicated that there's a schedule to check to ensure those features work. I will say that of those 46, most of those referenced our elevator checks, which are required by the state. So it was a yes, but it wasn't a real yes. I don't know if they really considered the buttons and the ramps and all of those things. Just this week, I actually had a conversation with our facilities maintenance to get me a really comprehensive list of the kinds of accessibility devices that need checking so we can make sure we're developing that. So that is something that, even though it wasn't checked when I developed this a few weeks ago, it is underway now. Only 64% had information about accessible facilities and services available to the public. Brian Groves, who's going to speak to us a little bit later on the website and all the work he's done with that, also helped address this issue. If you go to our website now, you will find a listing of all the city facilities, and those do list the accessibility features of those facilities, whether it's a ramp, a park, a fishing pier, one of our buildings. I think, and you might ask him this, Brian, if you could clarify this when you speak, you can search by the kinds of accommodations. If you're looking for picnic tables, you can search by picnic tables, and it'll show you all the places where those are available. So very helpful and much information that we did not have prior to April. 59% of the people did not have a statement on their webpage directing the public to the ADA webpage for information and accommodations. This one does not have an asterisk by it. We have not started addressing this yet because we are just overhauling the website in a very large way, and we're going to see where this one lands. So that's still on the radar, but we have not actively worked on that yet. So the action steps that were developed. There definitely needs to be better communication with the public about the accommodations that are available and how people can request them. I think the other half of that we've really worked on is we want to have more accommodations for people without them requesting them. If you came into this chamber, for instance, in April, you would not have seen these monitors up here that are doing the live captioning. Those were not present. That was something that was new. When you go to SAISD, you're going to see the old captioning equipment that we had because we, through an agreement, gave them that. So hopefully helping them become a little more accessible as well. So we are trying to do things like that to make it easier for people without them having to ask. We do have captioning on our videos. If you see somebody today told me, Andrea mentioned that she thought the captioning was missing from one of our city council meetings. Let us know that. I mean, Sharon's emailed me during a council meeting before and said the sound's not good, and we try to get that fixed as soon as we can. So we try to work on those things. We have large print documents at our facilities now. So we are trying to not make everything have to be a request. But again, that ADA page on our website is where you would go to make those accommodations. We are doing annual training on the basics of interacting with people with disabilities for all employees. Make it as part of onboarding our employees when they're newly hired, particularly those in front-facing or supervisory positions. Almost immediately after the survey results were turned in, we started training. I started with frontline employees because I felt like those were the people who interact on a daily basis with the most people. So we trained them first, and then we went to the assistant managers, the directors, and admin. So everybody from admin down to frontline employees have been trained on some, basic skills in interacting with folks with disabilities. And a lot of these issues that we identified were things that we're trained on. I'm also in the process of developing what I'm calling quick minute trainings. So the problem with big training sessions that are hour long is that we're leaving spaces unattended. A lot of our offices are short staffed as it is, and then when we're pulling people out for an hour or 2 hour training, that just increases the difficulty that they have. So I'm creating these trainings that are PowerPoints with me in a little corner box talking that are about 1 minute to 2 minutes long that focus on these various issues. So we'll email those out to all employees with an email address, whether they're front-facing or not. And there's a log kept of when somebody interacts with that, when they watch it, if they watch all of it. And that's going to be one of the ways that we're going to start doing training on a more frequent basis and keeping it at the forefront of people's minds. All accessibility features in the city facilities need to be an inspection schedule with routine maintenance provided as necessary. Again, this is something I'm working with facilities maintenance on, and we hope to have a schedule pretty soon. All right, so the next area we evaluated was communication. 56 of our employees were given and answered this survey. The purpose was to identify employee understanding of the city's responsibilities to provide auxiliary aids and services. And this one was kind of interesting for me as I was reading the responses, because pretty much everybody has a basic understanding that you need to provide these services, right? And the types of services that are out there, particularly the big ones. Braille, everybody knew about. Our interpreter friends over here, everybody knew about. But some other things like CART, which is computer-assisted real-time transcription services, any kind of assisted listening devices. When I would say that word, they wouldn't know what that meant really, and then I said the things that, the headphones you can wear at city council meetings. They were like, oh, okay. So there was a lack of understanding that we can and do provide a variety of auxiliary aids and services to the community, including CART services. You will need to ask for that in advance because we have to schedule somebody. Assistive listening devices are available at pretty much all of our public meetings that are held either here or over at City Hall. Video remote interpreting services. We have a shortage of interpreters in San Angelo. We tried to get an interpreter whenever Daniel did the State of the City, and we could not find anybody available to do one. So if anybody knows anybody who wants to be an interpreter, I know these ladies would like a break maybe, or some assistance. But that is something that we can offer. But when they're not available, we can get remote interpreting services. Where that has become very helpful is actually in municipal court. That's probably the most frequent place we use interpreters like this, but they have to be certified court interpreters. And so either they're not available or we have to get somebody to drive in from Lubbock. So once we realized and found a video remote interpreting service that we can just video somebody in, it not only saves a lot of time for that interpreter, but it saves us a lot of money because we're not paying them, their rate which is well worth it, ladies, to come in and drive for that 2.5, 3 hours from Lubbock. So the video remote interpreting is something that we've helped, and it is very, very important. Again, most of our employees were familiar, more of them were familiar with our ability to provide sign language interpreters. I think part of that had to do with we had just done a public meeting and they were present there, so people saw them. But now they all have been told that that is an option. One thing that was encouraging to me is one of the questions is, have you ever denied a request for an auxiliary aid or service? And that everybody, 100% of the people said no. So again, I think that goes back to this belief that I have that city employees want to be helpful. They may not know how to help, but if you ask them for help, they're going to try to help you. And is it going to be the most appropriate way to help? I hope so going forward. It may not always have been, but I do find that they are helpful and they do want to help. Our employees were unclear on the policies related to requests for auxiliary services, and the majority understand there is a responsibility to provide them. We've provided some training on them, where I'm going to start sending out more frequently. This is who you contact for these kind of services. These are the kind of services we offer. But the reality is we don't get a lot of requests for those things. So if somebody really needs one of those services, please have them let us know, because we do have them available. But I think part of the reason we're not getting a lot of requests is that the technology that you carry on your phones is so good right now. I mean, I think I've told you before that my mom is very hard of hearing. And recently, if you don't know this is so exciting for me, that FaceTime now has captioning. And so it's so much better to talk with her while she's looking at the screen. I can see her face. She's reading what I'm saying when she doesn't understand it, and it's much closer in real time than talking to her over her phone is. So there's a lot of technology out there that, you know, it's like if you have, and we train our employees this, if you have somebody sitting in front of you and they need some sort of cart service, why don't you try first using voice to text on your phone? Because your phone will do that same service while they're sitting there if that's appropriate. Many of the employees are unsure of what conditions there are that an auxiliary service can be denied and what a process would be to do that. We did a little bit of training on this, but this is going to need a lot more training. And this is also an area that I'm going to take back to the advisory board, because we do need some input on what they feel like is an appropriate process to follow when we are denying somebody an auxiliary aid or service. So the assessment also indicates there are 6 telephones available for the public, but none of them have TTY services on them. And I haven't done anything on this yet, because I'm still trying to dig into, one, where those 6 phones are located, because I can't find 6 that are available for the public. So I think that there might have been a misunderstanding of the question. You know, if you come and ask my office, can we use your phone, we're probably going to let you, but that phone is not designated for public use. We're just going to allow it to be used. So if we do have 6, I want to know where they are. I also want to know, is it a place where we actually need a phone available for the public? And then finally, is TTY the right service that we need to be providing to people at that location? Perhaps it is, perhaps it not, but there is more work to be done on that aspect. So the action steps. More education and training for employees. I mean, I think that's what it kind of boils down to. I think we have a lot of services that are available to the public, either under contract or we have a PO with them, so we can just call them up, schedule it, and it's done. But I think just making sure our employees are clear. One, if you see somebody struggling, you might ask them, I mean, would you like some assistance, perhaps? But also to be clear on who you request that from and all of those sorts of things. And then, you know, these services are not inexpensive whenever we do use these services. And no department has a budget line for assistive technology in their budget line, so everybody pulls it out of whatever money they already have. Right now, that is not a problem because we don't get a lot of requests, but if the requests start increasing, then we will need to start identifying some funding, I think, to address that. And I'll tell you, as the committee talks, and as I talk to people in the community, funding is one of the things that comes off often. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the city's efforts to fund some of these things in just a second. All right, the next one was department web pages. We had 38 employees answer this survey. That's pretty much everybody who has a department who has the ability to put somebody on some information on the web page or not. And this is a little bit deceptive. The purpose was to identify our understanding of our responsibilities for maintaining web pages in a manner that's accessible. But the questions really go to very intricate design kind of things that I'm not going to expect our employees to really understand. But what we did find, there is a general lack of understanding by employees who maintain those web pages of how to create and maintain that accessible data. So some of the areas of concern, our pages don't have skip navigation links when required, so that's really helpful when you're doing a screen reader. 60% of the links do not have text descriptions readable by screen readers. I know a lot of this has been remedied through the work that Brian has done recently. The photographs, maps, and graphics didn't have alt tags, also work that Brian has done a lot of work on, but those are supposed to describe what is visually being conveyed, even if it just says, like, what's the word? Decorative item or something that says this is nothing that's important, it's just for decoration. 82% of the documents that we have on our website are not posted in accessible formats. There's no descriptions of the controls to help complete online forms, and none of the videos at this point in time had written captions of spoken communication synchronized with the action. Again, we've worked really hard on those things, so a lot of that has become much better. And I think on the documents posted in accessible formats, I don't think there was a really great understanding by our employees at the time what an accessible format of a document is. I mean, there are Word documents that can be accessible, and there's ways to run accessibility checks on Word documents. I mean, I did that on this report before I put it online to make sure that Word didn't identify anything that would hang up a screen reader. I had to make some modifications to my pretty graphics to make it work, but we made it work. And but it's not in PDF because I couldn't figure out how to make PDF work. And the experts in the accessible documents field, I mean, one of them just flat out said, if you want to make PDFs accessible, you're better just hiring somebody than trying to figure that out yourself. So if we can do locked Word forms, that's pretty easy to do. The PDFs are different. Some of the action steps. I think this one, we are really working hard. Brian and Lorelei are both just working really, really hard on our website and web pages. And some of these action steps are going to have to wait and see where our website in general ends up before we know what work our web pages need. So we are already addressing the website and web page concerns. We secured a contract that Brian's going to talk about in a minute that analyzes the City of San Angelo website and identifies those specific issues. We're doing training. We need to train staff who are responsible. What exactly we need to train them on, we're not real clear, whether it's just creating accessible documents or maybe the website's so automated we don't need to train them. And then we need to identify the information that's not necessary. We've already spent some time doing this. A lot of documents were stored on our web pages that was not necessary, that's been removed. A lot of back documents, like behind-the-scenes documents that we stored there. And so part of making the documents more accessible is making sure there's not things that nobody ever wants to read on there that we have to make accessible, so we can focus on the ones that really are important. Right, emergency management. One employee answered the survey. He's actually going to be leaving in December. So we're going to have another employee answer the survey later. And the purpose was to evaluate the components of our emergency management process and make sure that it was accessible and that we help people with stay protected during emergencies. You know, I have extreme confidence in our emergency management and the employees. I mean, Shane and Patrick and whoever else was here that worked during the winter storm. You know, we had multiple shelters open. One was this building right here, and this room right here. I remember there was a family that had autistic children that needed low sensory environments. So the lights were dimmer, it was quieter in here rather than being in the big room. So we had, during that time, the water lines freeze in one of the apartment complexes that served elderly and disabled citizens. And all of them had to be moved. And all of them came here. And these were people in like the big, heavy chairs and people that had lots of medical needs and, you know, special diets and all of those sorts of things. And city staff, there's disasters. I mean, there's been a whole bunch of them since I've been here. And they are some of the hardest times for city staff. So, you know, y'all are at home trying to survive. We're at home trying to survive and trying to help everybody else survive. It's very difficult times, but it's a time where the city really and staff really pulls together and everybody just does what they need to do. And so we had people on medication. We had, you know, students from ASU were helping, you know, change different bags and medical devices and all those sorts of things. So we accommodated those people to, you know, everybody was healthy and happy, and we worked really hard in finding places for them to go if we couldn't accommodate a need. So I'm confident that when it comes to emergency management, we are going to do what gets done. Now, the questions in this section, do you have a policy that says you do this? Do you have a policy that says you do that? We don't. That's what we found, that there are no like real policies that outline those things, even though we're doing them. So the emergency management action steps. I can't wait for the new guy to get here because we're going to start working on this. But first, we need to seek input from people with disabilities when we're doing the planning and preparation. I'd really like to see a tabletop exercise that includes people with disabilities. And when I first got here, there was a contract with the state school that involved emergency management. And it expired, and I asked the emergency manager, you know, what is this? He's like, oh, we don't need that. And so I didn't know if we needed it, so we didn't renew it. But that was what this did. It allowed the state school to interact with the city in a way to help them develop better plans and strategies for handling people with disabilities during these emergencies. And we also need to make sure we disseminate information related to the individual notification system that state manages. You know, I think there's a lot of misconception amongst the general public on how emergency management is operated. It's very much a top-down system, where TDEM, which is the Texas Department of Emergency Management, we kind of report up to them, and there's this big reporting STAR system where we can request supplies, and they'll get them here, and it could be anything from, beds that you need for people who need a different kind of bed, all kinds of different accessible equipment kinds of issues can be requested through that STAR system. But they also have this database of people who need extra assistance during an emergency that they know, I can't evacuate myself, so I'm going to need somebody to come get them. You report that to the state, and that is disseminated out to your area. So that information has already been provided. I know MHMR has a great list. We provided it to them to send out to their list. We promoted it on our own social media to, if you have some sort of concerns with people, or for yourself or for your family about being able to manage yourself in an emergency, you should put your name on that list so we know where you are. So the emergency management action steps. These really come out of the policies that are supposed to be developed. We really do need to assess the shelters when one is set up to ensure that it's accessible. And that means things like you have accessible routes, that there's no protruding objects either on the floor so that people don't trip on them, but also at head height so that people who are visually impaired don't bump into them. We need to make sure there's accessible cots available at emergency shelters if requested. That again would be through the STAR system, but we should interact better with the Red Cross to make sure they have some of those. And then making sure we have reliable electrical supply, so medical equipment and refrigerators and chests for medication are available to folks. All right, ticketing. Ticketing, we only had one person answer this survey. It's the person who manages our ticketing contract. And the purpose was to ensure that we are complying with the new Department of Justice guidance on ticketing. There's not any requirements under the ADA regarding ticketing, and that's the case with a lot of things. That's the case with website management. But the Department of Justice considers that a program or service, and so they want those things to be accessible, so they give recommendations on how to make them accessible. So some of the areas of concern that came up during our ticketing evaluation is that we didn't have, our accessible seating wasn't described in enough detail. I don't know if you've been in the auditorium, you ever noticed there's the wheelchair spots at the front, but there's also down the aisles multiple seats that the handle lifts up, and there's a little wheelchair symbol on those. And those are also accessible seating, and people should be able to, if you have a chair, for instance, like this device right here, during the last production of Wizard of Oz, I bet we had 50 people who had walkers there. And so not only are the seats available at the front, but there's also lots of seats on the aisles, but I don't think it says that anywhere. And so making sure that kind of information is out there so people know there's lots of options for accessible seating other than the seats down there where the wheelchairs are supposed to go, because we really do want to preserve those for people who are in chairs. And a lot of our facilities, 3 companion seats, which is what they're recommending now, are not available for each accessible seat. I know at the River Stage, we created an accessible area, and we have these kind of chairs available for people if you're a companion. But we're looking at ways that we can accommodate that within our facilities. And I can't imagine anything sadder than going to a production with my child, for instance, and he has to sit up there, and then my seat's way at the back because there's no companion seat available for him. But we're working on that. And then there's not a certification stating accessible seats are being purchased for someone who requires accessible seating. So one of the reasons, whenever we talk to anybody in ticketing here, they like folks who need accessible seating to call. And the reason for that is they will say, do you need a wheelchair spot or do you need just an accessible spot? And they can ask those questions and kind of weed out the people who just want the front seat. Because there really are people in the world who just want to sit on the front row, and they're going to buy those accessible seats to sit on the front row. And so that was our way of kind of helping ascertain the need for that seating. And we're not allowed to do that anymore. We have to offer the same method per these DOJ guidelines as everybody else is offered. So what they recommend we do is we have a certification where people check the box that say, I certify that me or the person I'm buying this ticket for does need this seat. And then if we figure out they're lying, somehow we can kick them out. Well, that doesn't seem like, at that point, the seat's already sold, nobody's going to get it. But we're looking at a way to make that work because the DOJ thinks that's what we need to do. And if anybody has any other options or ideas about ticketing, we're wide open on listening to them because we do want to make that process fair, and we do want the seating that we do have available to be utilized properly. We have worked with vendors, and we're going to continue working with our ticketing vendors to make sure that they are aware. I was so shocked. I mean, we use Stubwire, and they had no idea that there were these DOJ guidelines, and so I was kind of shocked by that because they ticket everywhere in the world. But we are working with our vendors, and we're finding ways to provide the appropriate amount of companion seating, whether that's seating them behind or seating them, adjacent. Like I said, at the river stage, we bring out more chairs, whatever we can do to find those seats. Curb ramps. This is one of the areas I am most proud of right now. We'll explain why in a minute. But 2 employees answered this survey, and the purpose was to determine when our sidewalks are being modified, are we installing curb ramps to comply with the ADA? And the answers for these 2, there was confusion amongst staff on the answers as whose responsibility it was, first of all. And that sounds like, oh, why don't they know that? It really is not as easy as the city's always responsible. There are a lot of places and a lot of times that a public person or a public entity is responsible for a curb ramp. So they are very site-specific decisions that you have to make. So it's a little unfair to say that there was confusion. It's really more it's not as simple as the question makes it sound. Yes. There was no input from persons with disabilities for any of the construction plans, and people could request installation or repair, but those requests were not given priority when we were looking at where we should be putting these things. So the action steps, the first one is to develop and fund a curb ramp program. I know that was discussed multiple times during the budget sessions that we had, our strategic planning committee, our meeting, and then during the budget sessions. And next week at council, we're going to be taking a request to create a program with $275,000 worth of funding. And we're using money that we found from the LED lights that we're now installing on our streets instead of the old lights that took so much electricity. There's savings there. And they're allocating those funds to a curb ramp program, or that's what we're asking council to do, so that we can get an idea of what the need really is. And so that funding will be there. It'll be in a little pot designated for that purpose. We'll look and watch and see what happens with that and decide what the appropriate amount of that money is at some point in time. And Shane is back there if he has anything else he'd like to add about that. But again, that's what we're taking to council next week in a budget amendment, and I was very excited to see that is happening. You have anything you want to add, Shane? No. Shane's going to add nothing. Okay. Websites. Now, before we talked about web pages, every department has a web page. We only have these entities up here, these 4 entities affiliated with the city that have their own website. And so the 4 people responsible for those websites answered these questions. And the purpose was to determine whether or not websites are compliant. Again, the ADA does not have one word in it about a website, but it does have words in there about programs and services. And the Department of Justice has interpreted a website to be a program and service that is offered to your community. So your websites, therefore, under programs and services need to be accessible. So the 4 websites that were evaluated were the City of San Angelo, Fort Concho, the San Angelo Police Department, and then the Development Corporation. We currently have no policy within the City of San Angelo that requires the website to be accessible other than, just general ADA guidance or in compliance with the most current web content accessibility guidelines and standards. There's also no method by which we ensure that new information added to the website is in an accessible format. And only one of 3 staff members, and that's Brian, that manage web pages is aware of the standards and need for the website to be accessible. So some of the action steps that were identified is we need to continue to use the contracted service we have. If you've been on our website lately, you may have noticed some changes. Some are more subtle, that they're on the back end, that's how it processes things. But there's been a lot of change to our websites recently that's very helpful for folks. We're going to recommend that the San Angelo Police Department, Fort Concho, and Development Corporation are given pages within our website and not have their own website. 2 of those, the Police Department and Fort Concho, are both departments within the city. They're programs of the city. The Development Corporation is actually its own entity, so it might be a tougher sell to them. The San Angelo Development Corporation, Costa DC. And then there should be more input sought from citizens with disabilities on our website. I know I went to Lighthouse for the Blind and had a conversation with them about what they wanted to see. And really, screen readers, they are all about screen readers, and that's what they want to see. So Brian is here now to do a little website update for us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Groves. I'm the communications director for the city. Myself and Lorelei, we oversee the city's website. And so I'm just going to kind of give a brief rundown of some of the things that Teresa's talked about, a little bit of background. So our website was redesigned in 2014 by a company called Vision. And it was acquired recently in the last few years by a company called Granicus. So it is an older site. And so when it was designed, I don't think ADA was really a priority or was part of the coding or anything like that. And we're seeing that as evident as when we're making changes, is that things that should be there and should just be normal things that are taken care of on the back end are not. And so we're having to go in and manually change those. And so I wanted to say thank you to Kimberly Henry, because she brought up all of this last year, which kind of spurred us to start taking a deep dive and look at our website. And so what came out of that is is SilkTide, and that monitors our website. It does a whole lot of things, but the main reason we got it was so that it would tell us what ADA issues were there and how to fix them. Now, without going into too much detail, there's a good number of things that we can work on, and then there's several things that we can't, that are on the back end that the vendor only has access to. And so there's kind of stuff that we can't mess with right now. But we are constantly making as many changes as we can, as many improvements. The program will scan the website every 7 days. It'll let us know if there's broken links. It'll let us know any ADA issues that pop up and how to fix them. And so we are constantly looking at that, trying to figure out where we can fix things. And also, we want to hear from the public. If there are issues on certain web pages, if there are your screen reader isn't working, if things like that, please let us know. We want to make the website as accessible as we can. SilkTide is a great tool, but the community is an even better tool. Teresa talked a little bit about this, the city staff website background. Most of our city staff does not have a background on website. So we have a website liaison that for each department that is in charge of their pages. And what that really means is they update the text, they upload documents, and they do links, and they do a few other things, but that's really the basic stuff that they do. And so I was not surprised when I saw the results from the self-assessment that a lot of people were like, I don't know about this. I don't know about these rules, because we've never talked about them. And so right now what we're doing is we're trying to get the website to a good place with the WCAG standards. I don't know if we will get to that point before we go out for an RFP for the new website, but we're gonna do our best to get there. If we get to a point where we feel like the website has gotten to a good point with the WCAG standards, then we will probably do some training about things that we want our staff to do and to be on the lookout for, and to make sure that they're not undoing things that Lorelei and I are doing. We have a website review committee that is kind of in the early stages, but basically what we're doing is we're looking at our website, we're looking at the things we like, we're looking at things that we don't, and then we're looking at other city websites and seeing what others are doing better. And so ultimately that's gonna kind of culminate in a RFP, because websites are not cheap. And when it's government websites, that's a whole nother realm. And so that will ultimately probably have to go out for RFP, which means that we're gonna seek bids from companies. And so we'll ask companies that have a background in designing government websites to give us a bid. And with one of the main focuses of making sure our website is accessible for everyone. There'll be other things like, mobile design and things like that, but we're gonna push accessibility as one of our main needs for the website. And so I don't know when that's gonna be. We're still working on that. Maybe in the next year or two. That'll ultimately have to come to City Council for approval from a funding standpoint. So let me see if I missed anything. Teresa, you asked about the search filter on accommodations. So if you go to our facilities, like she was talking about, there's a way that you can filter out, what facilities have accessible picnic benches or walking trails and things like that. And as you drill down in those things on our website, it'll tell you facilities and parks that have those things. Again, we're not done with that. That's not a finished article. We're constantly trying to update that. If you have suggestions on how we can improve that, please let us know. We're hopefully going to add pictures to it. I know one of the discussion points that we've had is City Hall and where the entrances are located, where the accessible entrances are located, and we have ideas and plans to make that easier to understand, and that's just kind of an example. So again, we want your feedback, we want your help. There are things that we can do on our own, but also we need the community's help to know what we can do better. So anyway.
Brian, it's every couple of weeks, Brian will send me a message saying, hey, our web provider said that they can do this now. And it was something I didn't even know was an issue, but they have identified a new issue and they have corrected it before I even knew it was an issue. So thankful for him and Lorelei for all the work they're doing. They do spend lots and lots of hours. All right, so that was then. We have had a lot of exciting work since then. And all those asterisks, that we saw through that presentation have made progress since then. But there's other progress we haven't really talked about. First thing is we created the ADA Advisory Board that gives us advice and direction. Some of the bigger things that they did so far is they've approved policies on service animals, reasonable modifications, and contractors. One of my big things that I'm trying to do is not only address day-to-day issues today, but I want to create a culture here where we think about these things. And I know I'm annoying. I'm annoying to Shane and Patrick and probably Al, although Al likes it better than Shane and Patrick do, I think. Al is really excited about this. So I want to talk about it. So training frontline employees, city administration directors, assistant directors, and managers is one way we talked about that. We added the comment box to CoCDC ADA webpage for general comments and suggestions. We added consideration for ADA improvements to sitting funding programs such as tiers. You now get extra consideration if you're funding an ADA improvement on a project under our tiers program. We're ensuring that ADA improvements are included in all streets projects, and not only that they're included because they have been for a while, but that they're mentioned that they're being included. Howard Street, when that came to council, it was mentioned how much money of that was spent on things like curb ramps. Jackson Street, I think, was another one. We have a new future projects that are coming that all of those are going to have accessibility upgrades made to those streets. We upgraded the council. Yes, we are complying with law. We're upgrading the council chambers, which we've already done for monitors with live captioning during meetings. And, before this went live, we had the committee come in here and take a look at the placement of these monitors and make sure that nobody saw something that we did not see when we were making these plans. We're doing closed captioning on our programming on broadcast on Channel 17, excluding videos with music. Although we were just outside earlier and watching the screen out there, and there was music, and it was captioning the music. It wasn't just little musical notes, so maybe that's improving. Tremendous progress on the city website accessibility with more improvements to come. We are making much better efforts, and I think having better communication with the community, including providing information about that state database I told you about for emergency evacuations. We've amended our ticketing contract and require vendors to comply with the DOJ standards and make sure they have those standards so they know what they're complying with. They can't just say yes. We've worked with the concert promoter, and Wild West Fest this year had, both on the floor, down at the bottom, and at the top of the hill at the river stage, accessible seating available. And I went out there with him, and he was really into that discussion about how to make that and his concerns about comfort of people, for one, because if you're ever at the river stage in summer, that floor area gets hot. It gets really hot. And so thinking about, where's the best place where they're not like right next to the speakers, so it's too loud, but they're still not getting too hot. Planning modifications to the river stage overall is something that's exciting and coming, and Al back there has worked a lot on that. Providing, as we said, them more information about accessible facilities and programs that are available to our citizens. That website, but also just questions, and as people come and present at council, making comments on this is going to have this accessible feature or this accessible feature, keeping the dialogue out there. We're collaborating much better with other public entities. I have an open line of communication with SAISD, because one thing that I find, there's a lot of people out there in the world that are hurting. And there's a lot of people out there in the world that are very frustrated. And they often come to us because we are very visible to ask them for our help with that. And we can't always help them because a lot of times we have no capacity to help them. But there's often the case that we know somebody who can. So there are situations, particularly SISD, I have a great dialogue with them right now, where if somebody brings up an issue with parking, for instance, at a school at SISD, I know who I can reach out to right away, give them the information, and they're going to deal with it and come back. There was an issue at Shannon with them not having scales that could weigh people who were in wheelchairs. I reached out to Shannon, and the next thing I know, they have scales in all their clinics that can weigh people in wheelchairs. So even though we cannot solve all the problems, we do have a lot of contacts and friends, and I am more than willing to reach out to them and try to build those collaborations, because this isn't just a City of San Angelo job. This is a San Angelo job. And so trying to help everybody participate in that, I think, is really important. Accessibility is considered a more frequent basis, planning events and providing services. We have a special events process that any special event in the community gets reviewed, and I've been sending them back saying, I don't see any accessible parking for this, or there was accessible parking and you covered it up. So you're going to have to plan something different. And people are accommodating to that. They don't push back too hard on that. They're like, oh, okay, I forgot, I didn't realize. And then what's next? What's next? As I said at the beginning, this assessment was just on the programs and services offered. We didn't really spend a lot of time on facilities, with the exception of looking at those buttons and ramps and elevators and making sure they're working. So what's next is this transition plan update. What is true about a transition plan is it is a federal requirement that they pass down to the state. So any grant that we get, that the state gets, whether we're a subrecipient of a state grant that comes from federal money, or we get a grant directly from the federal government, we have a certification that we have to sign that says that we have an updated transition plan. So this came to my attention in 2018, and at that time we really started, where's our transition plan? We found it. It was very old, very updated. Well, there's no real requirement in the act that you update it, but there is a necessity to update it. So at that time we started, moving forward with updating it. We have since that time secured a contract with Kimley Horn, who has done a number of transition plans around the state of Texas. It's a big engineering firm, and if Patrick wants to say anything about them or about contract, he's welcome to do that. It was a request for proposals, so what that process entails is we took it to council saying this is who we want to negotiate with, and so we're currently negotiating scope of work, and we are negotiating the price. When we first started talking to Kimley Horn, they included all the self-assessment stuff in that assessment, and the price was about $300,000 more than it is now that we've done this in-house. So doing this process in-house, I think, not only has saved us a lot of money, but it has also been a more effective process, because if we have somebody from the outside come in and do it, it's just going to be a conversation with an outsider. But I believe, and you can ask some of the staff who are here, I bring this up on a very frequent basis because I'm responsible for it, and I'm inside the organization. I'm going to get to that. We're working on the scope of work. Patrick and I met about this a couple days ago. I'm looking at the scope of work they proposed. They still had some stuff that we've already addressed, so we're going to take that out of the work. And they are going to look at evaluating all of our streets, not all of them, but certain streets, certain distance of sidewalks, railroad crossings, lighted intersections, and our facilities where our public goes to get the services and programs. And they will create for us a list of the things that we need to improve, as well as kind of a priority for those things. What's kind of exciting about the way that these guys back here have done this is that they have combined it with a safety plan. And so the safety plan also looks at the safety of our streets from multimodal kinds of things. That's a planning engineering word that means all the different ways people travel through your city. So walking, biking, bus, cars. It looks at our city in that area. So we're going to be able to identify, by combining those two plans and those two evaluations, the areas where it's going to be most helpful to have sidewalks, most helpful to have curb ramps, the areas we want to focus on. So they're going to spend time with that. There's going to be, I want to point this out, there's going to be lots of public opportunity to comment during that process. And I really want people to come out, and I want all these people who are in this room to come and do that, because I drive through town as a person who's not in a wheelchair, and I am not going to see the world the same way you do. And we really need your input when you're coming through and doing, when these people are coming and asking us for our input, we really want your input to be part of that. So there's going to be public participation as part of that. I encourage everybody to come out. And then the other thing that I'm very excited about, I've always, since I've been here as a city attorney, have had an ASU intern in my office. I think it's really a valuable thing to pour yourself into young people, and especially when they're in college, and to preach the sermon of public service to them. So we've always had like an intern in my office. Well, the committee, Gigi, in part, and if she'd like to speak about this, I'll be happy to let her. We have a student committee at ASU who's part of the honor, yes, who is, why don't you come and tell them about it? Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I work at Angelo State, can you hear me? Okay. Angelo State University in the Department of Communication and Mass Media, and myself and another ADA committee member named Dr. Benjamin Brojakowski have been working with some of our honor students through Lambda Pi Eta to help with the ADA assessment. And he has met with them more. If you've ever been in college or taught in college or been a student, you kind of know this is a very busy part of the semester for us, and we have different teaching schedules. So he's actually been able to meet with the students. It hasn't aligned with my schedule this semester, but he is working with the students. We have about 10 to 12 students that are in this Honors Communication Society here, and they are working to help formulate some questions that we're going to send out to the public. And so like I said, we're researchers, and so that's what we do, is work on questions and things. So the students have helped us go through and kind of weed out questions and reword them where they're more clear, and they're based on some of the feedback that the ADA committee has given to the students. Oh, sorry. And so we're a small group. We're working on editing and finishing up those questions right now. Again, this is a busy time of the semester for us, so with finals and things like that and final grades. So we'll take off the next few weeks, and then whenever we come back in January, then we'll run another report of new students who qualify to be in that program, and then we're going to hit the ground running at that point, and we'll actually help to start pushing out that survey to the community. And so outside of the honor students, we've also had some other students that we've hand-selected that were not necessarily communication and mass media majors, but were students who are interested in advocacy and ADA accommodation and things like that, and have different experiences with different disabilities that we also felt would help with that as well. So
the idea of the survey was part of this self-assessment process, and as we were talking through our committee meetings, Ben and Gigi were like, we have students who can do that, and I know they can do better than I can do that, and they enjoy doing it in a way that I won't enjoy doing it. And one of the concerns that we have expressed to us is that people don't want to come talk to you and answer these questions with you because, you're the city and you're always involved in our lives, and it's just an intimidating experience. So having students do that, we think is going to be helpful, plus it's a great experience for that. So one of my favorite things about this whole period since April is the connections with people that we've been able to make, whether it's through my committee and through ASU and through ASAISD or through Kim and her group, or even Andre and I are able to talk about things in a real way that is very, very helpful. And I hope that dialogue continues. And I want to say that everybody in this room and everybody out there watching this meeting is welcome to be part of that dialogue, and we need you to be part of that dialogue. So we can do everything we think we need to be doing to make this better, but if you're not talking to us and telling us what you need, we still might miss the mark. So I'm going to change mics. So now it's going to be your time to talk to us. So before you do that, though, I do see we have Larry Miller here, who is part of our ADA committee, and his wife, Pat. They also were both very helpful in doing this report. They looked at a lot of data with us. Larry is one of our council members. We have Daniel Valenzuela, who is our city manager. We have Brenda Gunter, who is our mayor. And we have Tommy Hebert, who is a city council member here. And I don't see anybody else. So those are our officials who are here. So we want to hear from you. I mean, you saw the work that we did. You saw the improvements that we've made. What are we missing? What do we need to evaluate that we didn't evaluate? What do we need to move forward with that we haven't moved forward with?
Please. It appears that most of this was administrative and paperwork and websites and those things, which are okay and great. But for most of us that have been disabled or are disabled, those don't address our daily physical issues of getting around in the facilities and getting in and out of the facilities that we have to get in and out of every day, from the hospitals to the courts to all the places around here. And so this is lots of money that's being spent on making surveys and stuff. And people, we acknowledge that people don't know. And I know this because I've been doing this for 45 years. And so my concern is, now we've done all this, now where we move from here and getting the facilities, because I've gone around and surveyed myself, like buttons working and all that kind, and we are a failure. We are total failure. And then there's no system in the city for setting up for doing facilities maintenance where we manage these things. So and that's my next step, is how do we make it, these are all lovely, but for us to get around every day and to get in and out of the places in town. And so what's the next?
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I want to point out that there was not one penny more other than my salary spent on this self-assessment. I mean, we did this in-house. We didn't hire anybody else to do it. All of our board members are volunteers. So we saved the city a lot of money by doing this in-house. And I do believe we got a better result. The reason we did not do that transition plan in-house is I don't have the experience and knowledge to go out there and survey all of our roads and our sidewalks, and I acknowledge that. I mean, I'll do what I can when I feel like I have the ability, but if I can't, we're going to reach out to somebody else. As far as what you're saying about getting around the city, that is exactly what the transition plan is going to look at. So you really need to come to the next meetings. Yes.
Because I'm very concerned, because my husband was disabled, I was disabled, and legally disabled for 20-plus years, and I've been living in this city.
Yes. This next plan, that's for you. All right, who else? Anybody else have any comments, questions, concerns you'd like to add? Otherwise, we all get to go home early for dinner, but anybody? Yes, we have one back here. This is also one of my board members. We don't see each other because we're always on Zoom, so nice to see you.
So my question is for the emergency response. Is there going to be a better option for the actual response, like the alert system? Because like I know right now it's through the phone. I'm hard of hearing, and if I sleep at night on my good ear, I won't hear that phone. So is there is there something we're looking at as a whole to better prepare everyone in the community to receive emergency alerts?
So are you aware of a different kind of system that we should be looking at?
That's what I wanted to know.
Okay, we can look into that. I think that what we have, it does send you a text message. It also sends you but you're right, when you're asleep. I mean, the mayor and I walked through the tornado damage after that tornado happened in our town, and we talked to numerous people who woke up and their house was gone. I memean, they slept through the tornado. So, yeah, those don't always help.
I think what made me more aware of it is I work with a person, one of the people on my caseload, who slept through a whole fire alarm in her apartment complex. So that, if she slept through a whole fire alarm, what are the rest of our community doing in that?
I do think it's very important to make sure that people have their names on that list, so we know they might have issues of being evacuated. So if we see, for instance, the area that had the tornado, we could pull up that list and see if there's anybody on that list in that area, and we could check those places first. That doesn't really help them get to safety, but it certainly helps them get help sooner if we have that available for them. But we can see if there's other options within that system that we have, because I know it's used statewide and TDEM recommends it, so surely it has something. Anybody else?
Oh, one other thing, since we don't have landlines anymore, we've all gone to cell phones. One of the things that becomes an issue, if your cell phone is dead, how do you call 911? How do you call 911 if your cell phone is dead or anybody else? And it's a problem now, because I don't have a landline either anymore. And so and like during the big storm, when everybody lost electricity, if your cell phone dies, you can't call 911. And if you call so these are issues for all of us too. They're just because I was trying to get my husband out and we couldn't.
Right. I've seen that MHMR has sent out I'm on the MHMR distribution list, and there's lots of people that go to, and I know earlier in the year, they sent out a link to something, or it was a document that's explain to people how do you get prepared. And that's one of the things, that's one of the things that you need to focus on, making sure you have a way to communicate. Yes, Andrea.
I just wanted to thank you guys again, especially you and the committee, for all the hard work that y'all have done. We've come a long way in a short amount of time, and I'm super excited about what's going to happen next. I do want to see, how I know that we had talked about the river stage, because I'm still not able And I know a lot of people like me aren't able to go to stuff that's at the river stage just yet. So when is that plan gonna start, the construction and all that?
I have a person for you, right back here. This is Altor's. I do want to point out one thing that happened just this week that I've been like thinking about and talking about, and I've talked to the committee about creating not only an advisory committee of citizens, but also one of staff and faculty to look at specifically at these issues based on expertise. So Al has agreed, and Daniel has appointed him to be part of the internal committee to look at facilities. Patrick back here is the guy who was appointed to be the person who helps look at the streets, sidewalks, curb ramps, all of those kinds of facilities. And then Veronica Sanchez, who's in our HR department, she was appointed to the committee to look at all those Title I employment kind of issues. So Al?
We are currently working on the construction documents. We've looked at a lot of things in the river stage, and we have 2 phases. The first phase is where we're going to address most of the ADA issues. I just received a 30% complete set of documents from the engineers, so hopefully we're looking at first of the year to start construction.
So while we're doing updates, I want to do one more update. A couple people asked me this question, and I got the answer today, and I forgot to email them back, but I'm going to give it to you now. On the ramp, we did have people come back out and look at the ramp, and it's very obvious what the concern was. You know, when you go down that ramp, you're going down, and it's a long, slow slope, but at the end of it, there are stairs. And so it was precarious, I would say that. So we had people come back out and take a look at it, and we can't redesign the entire ramp. But what they are going to do is they're going to put some ballards down at the end of that ramp so that it's a nicer little curve around there, and you're not just going to go flying off the end of those stairs. We have ordered those. Oh, yeah, you got to talk in the mic. People at home are dying to know.
So we did come out and we looked at the bollards. We did get them ordered and they're being constructed. As soon as we get them in, our street and bridge crews will get in there and they'll have those installed. So, and we did work with our local RAS to make sure that it still met any ADA requirements of where we're placing those bollards. So there was some measurements and clearance issues that we needed to make sure we took care of. So we are aware of those whenever we put those in. So.
I think the best thing about the ramp is that it was a learning experience for a lot of us that just because we're doing what the regs say is the right thing may not actually be the right thing, and so communicating with people and helping them is actually important. Is there anybody else? I want to get back to your question, Mouse. Anybody else has a hand up so we get everybody? Okay.
Hey, Al, Torres, you probably don't remember me, Jackie Robinson and Dennis Robinson, Consolidated Contractors from years ago. Do y'all need any help as a volunteer to help y'all with that stuff? Because I'm an engineer and I can help you. And then the second thing is Westlake Hardware and the Stadium Park Plaza is a fire hazard, an ADA hazard, and a big fat problem now. And I've addressed this and taken this to the fire department. And now that they've got all of the additional items built like Jason's Deli and all the things over there, there is a big problem in the Stadium Park Plaza parking lot. And we have half of it taken up with stuff by Westlake Hardware, and ADA spaces are missing, and we have accidents happening in that parking lot. And from the hours of about 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock, it's like a zoo. I don't know if any of y'all been over there, and it's a continual nightmare. And we also have fire hazards set up from that, from things at the back. And I would like these addressed as well, and I've tried. But the ADA compliance is an issue because they're doing things and they're not ADA compliant. And that's one of those, I shop there a lot.
Right, yeah. Yeah, one of the things about the businesses, whenever we get a complaint like that, I will definitely call them and have a conversation with them. And I've had multiple conversations with people where I'm like, we had a complaint about their parking lot, and they're like, what? We didn't know. So I will certainly reach out. But the problem is that we don't have, like under the ADA, we don't have the ability to reach into private businesses once they're constructed. And almost everybody constructs them and has the RAS come out and take a look at what's in there, and it's all well and good. And then they close the bathroom to the public, for instance. That's one of the complaints I got. Or they allow, delivery trucks to park in the handicap parking. So we make contact and we do what we can, but there's not a lot of enforcement ability on the city. There are people, however, who can help you with that. And if you will email me, I will send you information on how to do that. Disability Rights Texas is one of those organizations.
Through permitting, these are all supposed to be engineered through permitting, and when permitting does them, everything is supposed to be done that way. And if people are not following permitting, they're not doing things to ADA compliance.
That's correct. But that's only at the build. One other thing that I forgot to mention that we did, we looked at the parking standards, because parking is like it's like in code enforcement, high weeds and dogs, those are the two things we hear about. And the ADA, parking is the thing we hear about a lot. And it's not just here. I mean, it's everywhere. People are very disrespectful of those parking spaces. So one thing that we did, whenever we install a parking lot, when a business installs a parking lot, they do have to go through our permitting process to get that approved, and we check to make sure they have the right number of spaces and they're all marked appropriately. Well, over time, that deteriorates. And until recently, we have not required, when they come and they redo their parking lot, for them to come back. So that is something that Patrick and I think Shane and John, when he was here, and I did a training on, and we were looking at finding a way that when they come back and they resurface parking lots, they need to come back and we need to make sure that they're striping them properly, because that tends to be when spaces get lost. All right, anybody else? Daniel? Yes, Mr. Larry?
One of the things we didn't touch on was all those little itty bitty things that you've been up to make corrections. Not a big program, but just little itty bitty things. Like you went around City Hall and discovered that it's really tough to get in here on that side door. Yeah. You know, I don't think Teresa touched strong enough on all the little things that are involved with this business. She's talking administrative end of it. But while that's been going on, folks have been taking a look at the things in the neighborhood that we can control, that we can make slight adjustments on just in the course of a normal day. Also, would you want to talk to your outreach with the police? Because I know you did training with them too.
Yes. I don't do training with them, but they have state-required training on all kinds of issues related to folks with disabilities. What has happened with the police is they are reaching out to me a lot more when somebody with a disability gets arrested. I've had at least 3 major conversations with not only us, but also other agencies about when somebody with a disability gets arrested, what do we need to do? We have a person who is in a wheelchair and very difficult to move around, so we can't just put them in the back of a police car, so what do we do with them? Those kind of questions. So we did evaluate their training. The committee spent an hour, maybe more, with Blue Flores, who's the training officer out at the academy, and went through all of the different kinds of training and retraining that they have to have. But, you know, on Larry's point, there are a lot of tiny little things that are happening all the time and every day. And the most exciting part about that for me is that 99% of them I don't even mention. It's like Austin Ayers over in building permits email me and say, hey, I noticed this on our website. I think I'm going to change it. It's like, you do that, yes. It's like Patrick and Shane, like integrating these 2 safety plan and transition plan together and figuring out ways that those 2 can work together in a way that's efficient, because the reality is this does cost money, and the reality is we don't want to get any more of your money than we can. So it's a lot of little things, like Larry said, but most of it doesn't come from me, and that's exciting.
You had talked about on next Tuesday at the council meeting that they're going to discuss the curb ramps and the budget for that. So have they not voted on that before?
No, I don't believe there's been a vote on that before. So what we had to do is find funding. You want to talk about this, Shane? Right, yes. Here, Mayor.
This funding must be used for this purpose. And there now will be specific funding for that purpose.
Right.
That only can be used for that purpose. Nothing. Yes, ma'am. Well, the meeting starts at 8:30. The meeting starts at 8:30 on Tuesday. By the time we get to the item, it'll probably be close to 9 o'clock. 8:30 in the morning? Yes, ma'am.
So Shane, would you like to add to that at all? Yeah, so where they identified money was, we used to have, I think I said the halogen lights, and now we have the LED lights, and so there's that money. So yes, it's a budget amendment, so you're not going to see curb ramps on the agenda itself. It's a budget amendment, though, that is going to allocate those funds.
Very exciting. Because we don't have a line item for that in our budget, because I've looked, and we don't, and we need that.
And we've talked about that also with Tina. There's a lot of money that's spent on, Tina, who's our finance director, that's spent on these kind of improvements, but it's just under, one of Shane Street's projects. We don't break it out into a special code showing this is how much went to the ramps on this project. And there's been talk about doing that so we actually have a real understanding.
construction, we incorporate. But if there's no new construction being done, there was no separate funding to correct perhaps an ADA ramp that needed to be put in from an old street of some sort. And there's been some specific projects identified and based off of that funding to go with it.
One more quick question on that. So wait. In that funding, is that going to address some of the city building access? Like downtown city building accessing and those kind of things? Is that going to address any of that? Just curbs, just curb ramps, that's it? Okay, everything else, okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, it is specific just to curb ramps. We want to keep that money for people when you request it, not like the mayor said, when we have a project that we're already doing it, but when you request it. All right, any other comments, questions, concerns? Got one at the back.
So I haven't been to a meeting before. So and I also arrived late, so I don't know if this was addressed either. But what is the city doing to encourage mobility without a vehicle? And I think specifically of more sidewalks, more walking trails like directly to essential businesses, bike lanes, public transportation, encouraging mixed use zoning, so that way essential businesses can be built closer to homes, to make it more walkable. Yeah, that's what I got.
Are you an urban planner? You sound like an urban planner. Shane has an answer for you.
Can't necessarily address the planning issues of it, but as far as the sidewalks and the multimodal use, we did just recently, within the last 30 days, received an $18.7 million grant to enhance our sidewalks and our, not only our sidewalks, but also, it's mostly a sidewalk grant, but also will address some bicycle lanes and those as well too, so. But no, yeah, we just received that, so you'll be seeing a lot of construction going on in that area.
What about recent projects that we've done? Jackson Street?
College Hills currently, yeah. College Hills is a new sidewalk all the way from Avenue N to Sunset. One of our projects coming up will be Sunset Drive as well too. Sidewalks from Knickerbocker all the way down to College Hills, all the way over to Sherwood Way. Howard Street as well, so no. Johnson will be coming up in the future, so that will be one coming up in the future in front of the college, go all the way from Sherwood Way down to Knickerbocker to tie back into our Red Arroyo Trail system. So yeah, we are working quite a bit in that area right now, so.
Let me add
Mayor.
something to You specifically asked about public transportation, and we on a every other month basis have a meeting called the MPO, which was Metropolitan Planning Organization, which talks primarily transportation, but very specifically into the bus system. And ridership has been up on a specific program where before there were bus stops, right? And you had to get to that bus stop in order to get on a bus to go wherever you needed to do. And now they have a program called On Call. It might be the wrong words, but basically, if you have a mobility issue and you need bus transportation, you call and they can come get you. And if you talked about a year ago or 2 years ago, we didn't have that system, so you had to use the existing bus stops and figure out how to deal with that. Today, there's a program that has seen some of the greatest increase in ridership, which is this on-call. Daniel, Shane, is that what it's called? But basically, if it says you live at a certain address and you need bus transportation, we'll come to your home to get you. And that's been a huge, big improvement for public transportation.
All right. Hey, Deandra.
I go to West Texas Rehab twice a week, and so I usually schedule my buses the week before. And so I schedule my buses for today and Monday last week. And so at a rehab, my therapist asked me to come in on Friday. And so I called the bus stop or the transit to set up my bus for Friday. So that's 2 days' notice. Now I was refused a bus. They said that they didn't have any more available spots, and so they're not giving everybody transit because I was refused 2 days in notice.
Yeah, Transit, we'll pass that on to them. Transit is one of the partners we work really closely with. Patrick, Shane, and I are negotiating a contract with them right now, talking about a part of that contract is the bus stops and the facilities and working how we can work better with that. Yes.
So going along with that, that's a pretty popular problem lately, and we've got a lot of complaints on that because we have several people that use it. And with that, it is told that you have to give 48 hours notice. So if you have an appointment on Monday, you have to give your notice by Thursday. So 48 hours notice should have been enough, but that's becoming more of an issue and more popular of a complaint with our users who frequent that service, that they're being denied even with the allotted notice.
That's good information.
That is good information. We'll inquire about that. The last time I went to the Lighthouse to the Blind for a meeting, gosh, probably about, when did we go, Brian? Oh, he's back there. 5 or 6 months ago, and this conversation came up. And at the time, it was the lack of drivers on behalf of Concho Valley Transit. I think they have the same issues with drivers that we sometimes have. So I think that's part of it, but we'll certainly pass that concern on.
And to add to that, yeah, that's been a problem. That was a problem for my husband. And what problem is we have lots of medical appointments, and those change, especially in today's world. And so when you only have a day's notice, and then you can't go to your appointment because you can't get transportation because the city it's too bad. And I don't even know how you qualify for all this stuff. And it's a problem because we again get isolated. We don't get our therapies. We don't. Yes, ma'am.
All right, anybody else? Nope. Okay, good. We'll send you home 30 minutes early. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank everybody who's watching online or who's going to watch later. Please reach out to us. There is that comment form, costatx.us/ADA. You can also email teresa.james@costatx.us or call us. Come by, all those things. We're happy to talk to you about these issues. What we really want is just input. So thank you for coming. If you have any other questions, there's some staff members here. If you grab them before they leave, feel free to ask them questions, but we'll see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, did you want to say?